الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise and thanks is due to Allah, and may peace and blessings be upon our Prophet and Messenger, his companions, and all those who follow their path until the Day of Judgment. In this lecture, in this sixth lecture of ours, we will talk about the meaning of the word La ilaha illallah. The meaning of the words La ilaha illallah. The ulama of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah agreed that the words La ilaha illallah do not in any way mean in Sharia that what they only hinted in language. Thus, if a person follows only the linguistic meaning of these words, the linguistic meaning of the words La ilaha illallah, he will not arrive at the desired or correct meaning. And if a person achieves only the meaning to which the language refers, he will not become a Muslim, nor earn Allah's forgiveness, nor he will enter paradise. This can be connected or compared with the meaning of the word zakah, which linguistically means cleaning. And when talking about the Sharia meaning is not tahara, cleaning the body, cleaning some rooms or some surfaces, but cleaning one's possessions, his money, his mal, from suspicious things, by giving 2.5% on a certain value. If it is gold, silver, money, giving on the value of the nisab, which is so and so many grams, and on cattle, so and so many head of cattle. So the linguistic meaning of zakah is cleaning, but the Sharia meaning of zakah is something completely different and completely deeper. Also, the linguistic meaning of the word salah is the same as the meaning of the word dua, i.e. supplication or prayer, but its Sharia meaning is a set of actions, spiritual, physical worship performed 5 times a day, facing the Qibla, with the purity of the body, with the correct niyyah, and which begins with the initial takbir and ends with the salam. Thus, a person cannot say that he prayed, that he performed salah by simply extending his hands towards the sky, which is the linguistic meaning of the word salah, the same as dua. As in some translations of the Quran in Bosnian language and maybe English language, the word ibadah, instead of being translated by the word servitude, worship, or by some other word that includes many acts of submission, it is translated only as prayer. And when taghut is mentioned, it is translated only as shaitan or statue or idol. So a very narrow meaning, and many of the problems we encounter later arise from this. I will give you just one example. There is a dal, delusional person in Kosovo, a follower of one of Sufi tariqah, a sect that left Islam. That man once told to one friend of ours, "You will be asked on the Day of Judgment because you prayed." This Sufi, this kafir, disbeliever, he wanted to say that prayer is not grounded in our faith. Our friend tried to answer his stupidity and asked him the question, "Who are you actually?" To which this Sufi replied, "We are Alif Lam Mim. We are Surah Al-Baqarah from the 1st to the 5th ayah. Read the beginning of the surah, that's us. I will open the Quran for you." So he opened the Bosnian translation to him and showed him that it says, "Yuqimuna salah," those who perform the prayer. Our friend said to him, "You said you are people from Surah Al-Baqarah from the 1st to the 5th verse, and you see that the prayer is ordered there. So why don't you pray salah?" But he answered to him, "No, we don't pray, and we are one of those from Surah Al-Baqarah. Here, as you can see, it says those who perform prayer and give zakah. We give zakah, and you see we are constantly in prayer. We constantly mention Allah, twirling the rosary, so-called tasbih, in his hand." Delusion upon delusion. But often things like this misunderstanding come about by mistranslating the words that are the basis of this faith. The word as-salah should never be translated with supplication, prayer, address, asking for help, or anything similar, but it should be translated with simply salah. Not even namaz, because the word namaz came to us from the Turkish or Persian language. Just as zakah is not translated, it is simply said zakah, so that someone does not understand it as sadaqah, charity, that which is beyond the obligation, what you give if you want, while zakah is what you have to give, what you must give. Likewise here, in the meaning of the words La ilaha illallah, the one who takes it literally and does not turn to the true meaning of these words, who stays only on the linguistic meaning, he can go astray. However, thanks be to Allah, even in the linguistic meaning itself, to the one who wants to be on the haqq, on the basira, on the guidance, on the truth, even in the linguistic meaning itself, there it is clearly seen that it was not said, there is no one who is Lord besides Allah. It was not said, there is no ruler but Allah. It is not said, there is no creator, no provider, there is no giver and taker of life but Allah. I.e., Rububiyyah was not specified, but it was said, La ilaha illallah. There is no God, there is no deity but Allah. Or an even better definition agreed upon by the ulama of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, there is no true ma'bud but Allah. And ma'bud is all that is worshipped, to which ibadah is performed. Therefore, there is nothing to which ibadah is directed but Allah. Of course, bihaqqin is mentioned here, with haqq, with right and merit, knowing that people take various ma'buds, those to whom they perform ibadah, which are often statues, people, insects, angels, private parts, animals, constitutions and invented laws, sun and moon and many of Allah's creatures to whom ibadah is performed. But all this is not according to haqq, by right, by merit. The meaning of the shahada, testimony of this faith, is La ilaha illallah, there is no ma'bud bihaqq, i.e. there is no one who has the haqq, who has right, who deserves to be worshipped. There is none who has the right to be worshipped with the right except Allah. That is why we say that a man must accomplish and achieve all the forms of Tawheed, all the categories and subtypes of Tawheed, as scholars much later, after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the Sahaba, the Tabi'un, clarified as Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, and Tawheed al-Asma'i was-Sifat. In this division, we say that the most important category of Tawheed is the one by which faith is achieved, the one with which one enters paradise, and the one that, until it is achieved and fulfilled, a person will not become a Muslim and he will not be saved from hell, and it is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, or Tawheed al-Ibadah, Tawheed of worship, Tawheed of Allah's divinity, Allah's oneness in that which only to Him belongs, our Ibadah, our good deeds. Namely, Muslims are obliged, just as they make Allah one, they single Him out in His deeds that He does in the universe and in people themselves, in qadr, in prescribing, so to make Him one and only in their deeds. So as we make Allah one in His deeds, believing that He alone creates, He alone provides, gives and takes away, gives life and death, gives fertility and barrenness, gives safety, preserves and guides, only He will put everything to death on the day of judgment, only He alone will bring everything to life, He will examine, the account will be laid before Him. After we witness only to Him His acts of rububiyyah, of creation and maintenance, we also must dedicate only to Him, and that is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah or Tawheed al-Ibadah. We must direct all our works or our deeds, all our ibadah. None of our ibadah must go to anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the true meaning of shahada. No one is ma'bud with haqq. No one is ma'bud, no one is worshipped by right, by justice, by merit. No one is ma'bud but Allah. Today many creatures are ma'bud. Many creatures are those whom the ibadah is performed to, done to. Ma'buds are people in parliaments. Ma'buds are presidents of states. Ma'buds are priests and monks who allow haram and forbid halal. To the Hindus, ma'buds are animals, cows and rats and insects and other creatures and animals. To the Christians and Buddhists, ma'buds are statues and idols. To some tribes in Africa and Asia, ma'buds are the private parts, sexual organs. These are all ma'buds because people direct worship to all of them. But only Allah is ma'bud with haqq, because worship truly belongs to Him alone and only He deserves our servitude. Why does Allah deserve our worship? Because He created everything, because He gave everything, because one drop of blood in our organism nor one cell in our body cannot exist or cease to exist by itself except by His permission, just as nothing in the universe exists without His permission. Nothing can happen without His permission. So everything is under His control, and only He, because He is the only Rabb, only Master, only He has the right to be the only Ilah, only God, only object of worship, the one to whom ibadah is directed. There are various beliefs and various delusions that some people can be chiefs, that some dead people can be awliya, that something from ibadah can belong to some people, good or bad, that they possess something from rububiyyah. But the one who has understood Tawheed and who has not corrupted his fitrah, his pure nature, the one who truly understands Allah's rububiyyah, he must dedicate his ubudiyyah, his ibadah, only to Him, to Allah alone. Only to one and only Allah, because indeed He is the only ma'bud by haqq, and there is no ma'bud with the merit and right to it except Allah. Many are worshipped, but none of them is worshipped according to the haqq except Allah. This shahada of faith, that no one has the right to be worshipped except Allah, is built on two basic foundations, on two pillars. The first of which includes the complete absolute rejection and negation of the existence of other gods, and that first foundation is a part of this statement, the first part of this testimony, La ilaha, i.e. there is no God, or no one has the right to be worshipped, which without a continuation, without a second half, illallah, would be words of kufr. And the second part, the second foundation, the second pillar of this shahada includes the concept of affirming that the only one who is worthy of worship is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is represented by the second part of this shahada, illallah, except Allah. So first the negation, then the confirmation. First the negation, la ilaha, then the confirmation, illallah. That is the first denial of the right to be worshipped to everyone, and then from all those who are denied from the right to be worshipped, the only one to whom the right to be worshipped is confirmed is singled out and highlighted, and that is Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and that is the most intense form of statement. Negation and then confirmation, because it was not said simply Allah is God. It was not said Allah is the Master, so that a person could say, yes, Allah created everything, but I worship this or that. A'udhu billah. It was not said Allah created everything and only to Him prayers belongs, so that a person can think that he is allowed to perform some other ibadah to someone else, to feel fear of someone else, or to do the shafa'ah through someone else to Allah, and so on, because it has already been said no one has the right to be worshipped. So from all those to whom it is denied, only to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala this right has been confirmed. That is, this negation does not apply to Him Azza wa Jal, but all acts of ibadah should be and must be directed only to Him, the one and only. The first thing that must be mentioned in this regard, and what is important to remember, is that the person who fulfills and achieves only the side of negation, only this first foundation, exclusively negation without confirmation, he is not a believer. The person who fulfills this foundation, the pillar of negation, La ilaha, and who does not achieve the pillar of confirmation, illallah, is certainly not a believer. The reverse is also true. The one who fulfills only the side of confirmation, illallah, without the side of negation, La ilaha, is also not a believer. A person cannot be a Muslim, a believer, if he doesn't achieve and fulfill, not only to say and pronounce, but to implement in his life and to die upon it, to fulfill both pillars, the pillar of negation and the pillar of confirmation, and that in his aqidah both pillars be confirmed and presented by the belief of the heart, by his speech and his actions, external and internal, external, visible and public, and what is internal, hidden and secret in himself. The acts of kufr, the very reason for disbelief, are sometimes there because a person did not fulfill this rule of negation, so the person did not negate anything. He truly worships Allah, the Most High, but neither with his heart, nor with his tongue, nor with his actions, or with just one of these did he manage to negate, to deny the worship of others besides Allah. So he did not commit kufr in taghut. So he worships Allah, he fulfilled the pillar of confirmation, but along with that confirmation, he performed ibadah to a taghut, or to those who are shuraka, andad, ILAHA, who are not true gods, but they are invented false gods, taghuts, and dads, shuraka, and ILAHA besides Allah the Exalted. He performed ibadah to some of them, even if only one single type of ibadah once, on only one occasion. A person can only, at one moment, in a single way, offer one single ibadah to the false god, and only by that he leaves his faith, and all the ibadah he has directed his whole life to Allah Azza wa Jal does not benefit him. It is not worth it, it fails, and he is not a Muslim, but becomes a murtad, apostate. A man who, on the other hand, attains and fulfills the pillar of negation, only the negation, will not be a Muslim until he achieves the pillar of affirmation, for it will be in vain for him that he doesn't worship anyone besides Allah if he doesn't worship Allah at all. In that way, he achieved kufr in taghut, kufr bit taghut. He doesn't commit shirk in any way. He does not help the mushrikun against Muslims. He does not support the laws other than Allah's law. He doesn't engage in sihr or other forms of kufr. He didn't worship anyone besides Allah, but all this will not be of any use, any benefit to him. He will not be a Muslim because he didn't perform any worship to Allah. And that worship must be the achievement of all that Shahada entails, and which is understood from the very meaning of the word La ilaha illallah, and especially by the stronger and correct thinking by performing prayer, salah. Thus, if a person doesn't fulfill La ilaha illallah and doesn't pray, he is certainly not a Muslim, even if he has achieved the pillar of negation, even if he has never committed shirk, never worshipped shaitan, tawaghit, shuraka, and dad. If he doesn't worship Allah, he cannot be a Muslim. Only when a person fulfills and achieves both the pillar of negation, La ilaha, and the pillar of confirmation, illallah, when he achieves them both in his belief and in his speech and in his actions, only then he becomes a Muslim, and only then he is on the right path. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said regarding those who took refuge in the cave, Ashabul Kahf, وَإِذِ اعْتَزَلْتُمُوهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ فَأْوُوا إِلَى الْكَهْفِ. So when you separate, when you withdraw from them and from what they worship besides Allah, take refuge in a cave. In this speech about the young men who were in the cave, both aspects are expressed, both rejection or negation and confirmation, because it mentions that their rejection and separation, renouncing the mushrikeen and all that they worship besides Allah. وَإِذِ اعْتَزَلْتُمُوهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Therefore they did not reject worshipping Allah, but they rejected only what their people worshipped besides Him, because He is the only one worthy of worship, and to Him alone, because He is the only Rabb, belongs the right to be the only Ilah. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said regarding Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي فَإِنَّهُ سَيَهْدِينِ. When Ibrahim said to his father and his people, إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ, I renounce, I am pure, I am innocent of what you worship, مِّمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ, what you worship, إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي, except the one who created me. So he renounced, he rejected their ma'bud and their ibadah, but he rejected only what they worship besides Allah. He did not reject their entire worship, because they worshipped Allah and someone else beside Allah. And that is why they were mushrikun. Worshipping Allah did not save them nor lead them to Islam, because they worshipped others at the same time besides Allah. Thus here Ibrahim alayhi salam was disgusted by their failure to achieve the pillar of negation, and so he renounced what they worship. He rejected and negated what they worshipped, إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي, except for the one who created me. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about Ibrahim alayhi salam that he said, أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْبُدُونَ أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمُ الْأَقْدَمُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِي إِلَّا رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Don't you see that what you and your ancient ancestors worship, they are really my enemies. Illa Rabb al-Alameen, except the Lord of the worlds. Therefore, what you and your ancient ancestor worship, those to whom you direct ibadah, they are my enemies except the Lord of the worlds. Why? Because they worshipped others besides Allah, but they also worshipped Almighty Allah with them. So they were not one of those who achieved neither confirmation nor negation, because they achieved confirmation, they worshipped Allah, but not negation. Ibrahim's people directed one part of their worship to Allah, and they directed the other part of their worship to false gods other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here Ibrahim alayhi salam rejects their non-renouncing, that is, he renounces or he negates their non-commitment of kufr bit-taghut. He renounces and he rejects their shirk when he says, don't you see that what you and your ancient ancestors worship, indeed they are enemies to me. All those whom you worship are enemies to me, illa Rabb al-Alameen, except the Lord of the worlds, because that is set apart. So only that is what you worship by haqq. Only Allah is what you worship by haqq, by right. In this verse, we see that Allah's Messenger Ibrahim alayhi salam publicly announced, publicly declared his enmity and his renunciation and rejection of all false gods, all andad, all shuraka, all aliha that people worshipped. And then after that, he confirmed his ibadah, his worship of Allah the Exalted, who alone is worthy of worship. These verses of the Quran and others besides them show that those who were in the previous nations of the previous mushrikun worshipped Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, but they associated others with him, they made shirk to him, they made others equal to him, they took others as partners besides him. Hence, if Ibrahim had only announced his complete bara, his rejection of all that the mushrikun worshipped, without making his exception for the Creator, this would lead to the conclusion that Ibrahim alayhi salam also rejected Allah. A'udhu billah. However, as mentioned, Ibrahim was clear in his affirmation that he is pure from what they have taken as an object of worship, ila Rabb al-Alameen, except the Lord of the worlds, and in the previous ayah, illa alladhi fatarani, except the one who created me. So this was a speech about the fact that a person must fulfill both the first and second aspect, the pillars of shahada, the pillar of negation, and the pillar of confirmation. La ilaha illallah, both in believing with the heart and in words and deeds, in order for his shahada to be correct and to be a Muslim in general. Second, in this definition that we mentioned, La ma'budu bihaqqin illallah, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. This bihaq, by virtue, by merit, by right. We said that now, just to repeat and confirm, that the purpose of this part of the statements, bihaq, the purpose is to exclude all those false gods who are worshipped besides Allah the Exalted, who are devoid of and certainly do not have any of the attributes that would give them the right to be worshipped. For one to truly deserve to be a ma'bud, a person's sound logic, his mind and reason, and his pure, uncorrupted fitrah must affirm that the one who claims to be worthy of people's ibadah, the one who claims to be worthy to be worshipped, he must be the one who gives life and death, the one who rules and governs, the one who provides and benefits and harms, the one who gives fruitful and unfruitful, the one who creates and determines, etc. All the gods besides Allah who are ma'bud, those who are worshipped besides Allah, they are not ma'bud bihaq. They are not worshipped by right or merit, because they have no right, no share in creation, in maintenance, in provision, and in the final destruction and later eternity of heaven and hell that Allah created, etc. Therefore, they neither have the ability nor do they have the properties or functions to be included in the gods. They do not have the qualities of uluhiyyah that would afford them the honor to be worshipped instead of Allah or alongside with Allah. Today, many are worshipped besides Allah, and there are many ma'buds, and there are often living people today, taghuts, who are worshipped besides Allah, but they do not have the qualities of rububiyyah, and that is why neither the qualities of uluhiyyah should be attributed to them, nor should any of our ibadah, our ubudiyyah, our servitude, our fear, our desire, our hope should not belong to them, our support, let alone our prayer, our worship, our submission, our love. The third thing that should be mentioned is that the definition of Shahada shows the falsity and all the incorrectness of the understanding that unfortunately exists among many today in the words La ilaha illallah, because the majority of people understood that the meaning of these words is only there is no creator but Allah, or there is no one who harms but Allah, or there is no one who benefits but Allah, or there is no one who provides, who gives death, who gives life, who rules, etc., except Allah. I want to say that the definition of La ilaha illallah in the heads, in hearts, and in understandings of many people, that definition has been reduced to the mere meaning of Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. So when they include Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, they think that they have realized and achieved and fulfilled the meaning of the words La ilaha illallah and what they refer to. This definition, I said, for a person to think that La ilaha illallah means that there is no other creator, ruler, giver of death besides Allah, although it is somewhat correct, because Allah really is the only one who gives death, the only one who gives life, and the only one who provides sustenance. This definition certainly does not include the core of what is meant to be said and encompassed, and what is meant to be pointed out by these words of Shahada. The proof for this is the fact that the people, that the mushrikun of earlier times confirmed these facts and affirmed and accepted that Allah has all these attributes. They all testified it and believed in it. The Quran does not speak about atheism, and it does not speak about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah calls to Tawheed, when Allah calls to faith, He does not call with words of mentioning, proving and convincing that He exists. So today's atheism is more of a problem, but the Quran was revealed to the mushrikun, to the polytheists, not those who deny Allah's existence, but to the mushrikun, the people of shirk, who affirmed Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, who affirmed and accepted Allah's unity, His oneness in creation, power, authority, governance, legislation, in order to show to such mushrikun that if Allah is like that, and if He alone has all these attributes, then He must certainly be the only one to whom all worship should and must be directed. All the mushrikun, all the polytheists of earlier times, as Allah mentions in the Quran, they all testified and accepted and agreed that Allah is the only one who possesses all these attributes. But they still directed their ibadah to someone else besides Him. The fact that they believed that Allah is the only creator, they believed that Allah is the only ruler, the only one who gives and takes life, He is the only one who makes happy and unhappy whom He wills and misleads and guides, that did not bring them into the framework of this faith. That didn't make them Muslims, but they remained mushrikun all the time. Why? Because a person who doesn't understand the meaning of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah and who doesn't direct all his ibadah to Allah alone, achieving the first pillar of Shahada, La ilaha, denying all ibadah and the right to ibadah to false gods, taghuts, and then fulfilling the second pillar, ILLALLAH, directing all his ibadah only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such a man is certainly not a Muslim, and it will not benefit him that he believes that there is no God but Allah and that Allah is the only Lord. Therefore, they are still considered mushrikun, polytheists, the mushrikun of former times, who deserve to be fought against and against whom Allah's prophets and messenger fought in this world, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you ask them, مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, who created the heavens and the earth, لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ, they will surely say Allah. Also Almighty Allah said, قُلْ لِمَنِ الْأَرْضُ وَمَنْ فِيهَا إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Say, whose is the earth and those who are on it? If you know, سَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّهِ, they will say, Allah's. قُلْ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Say, so will you not come to your senses? Thus anyone who accepts Shahada and believes that it only carries the meaning of Rububiyyah, creation, power, maintenance, So he thinks and believes that this Shahada only means that there is no creator, no Lord besides Allah. He did not understand Shahada correctly as it is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and as it is commanded by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this Shahada, understood in this way, limited only to Rububiyyah, will not benefit him in the hereafter, and there is no doubt that he will remain with the unbelievers forever in Jahannam. The fourth thing to mention is that the Shahada of faith includes the complete Tawheed in all forms: Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, and Tawheed al-Asma'i wal-Sifat. In order for a person's faith to be correct and for him to achieve Tawheed and the meaning and the core of the words La ilaha illallah, a person must fulfill all that is indicated by the definition, especially Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. That is, that Allah possesses the right to ibadah, that He is the one and only in His right to people's worship. A person must also believe in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, what is meant by Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, which is that Allah alone has the authority, that He alone has the power, that He alone creates, supplies, gives life and death, and to believe in what the meaning of the definition of Tawheed al-Asma'i wa Sifat refers to, which is that Allah is the one who has the most beautiful names and the most perfect attributes. Those are the three categories, as I mentioned them and as you know them: Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, and Tawheed al-Asma'i wal-Sifat, with the fact that I first mentioned Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah because it is the most important of them, and without its fulfillment, the fulfillment of the previous two is of no benefit to a person, and its fulfillment of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah indicates that a person at the same time has achieved Rububiyyah and Asma'i wal-Sifat, because the one who has fulfilled Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah and who directs all his ibadah only to Allah, who worships only Allah and doesn't associate anything with Him in ibadah, the one who understands this, certainly this indicates that he has understood, he has implemented and correctly believes in the unity of Allah, in the oneness of Allah in His Rububiyyah and the oneness of Allah in His names and attributes. As soon as a person did not direct any of his acts of ibadah to anyone other than Allah, it is certainly assumed that this indicates that he truly understood that only to Allah belongs his ibadah, because Allah is the one who is the Lord and who is the only sustainer, ruler and creator, and that He is the only one who has all the attributes of perfection and the most beautiful names, because man doesn't direct his ibadah to another except to the one whom he believes that he really possesses some of the attributes of perfection. Because a man doesn't worship something for which he knows that it cannot harm him or benefit him. This division into categories, Al-Uluhiyyah, Al-Rububiyyah, and Al-Asma'i wal-Sifat, is certainly not from the Sunnah, because this definition was not mentioned by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only did he not teach the companions this division of Tawheed into categories, nor did he mention these names and definitions, Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma'i wa Sifat, but neither the companions nor the Tabi'un ever mentioned it. No, rather this came much later, when definitions and terms and many disciplines were elaborated in the religion of Allah, when there was a need to speak about the mistakes of many people who made a mistake in some fields and aspects of Tawheed. In order to explain that it is not enough for people to believe that Allah is the only creator, and that at the same time these people direct ibadah to someone else, there was a need to separate Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah from Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, in order to indicate that people, although they achieved one part of Tawheed, they did not achieve the most important one. In spite of their supposed belief in Allah's lordship, they did not direct each and every ibadah to Him alone, to Allah alone, which was the most difficult thing for them to do. Therefore, because this division of Tawheed into categories is not from the Sunnah, if someone dares to mention another category of Tawheed besides these three, he cannot be objected to for coming with an innovation, bid'ah, because bid'ah is something that is contrary to the Sunnah. And in order to prove that the mention, for example, the fourth category of Tawheed is a bid'ah in the faith, it should be proved that the division into these three categories is from the Sunnah. And since this cannot be proved, one cannot object to someone who comes with something new in the categories of Tawheed. I will mention one of the categories of Tawheed that some people today often mention in addition to these three categories. The fourth category, which is Tawheedul Hakimiyyah, that is Allah's oneness in His right to make laws and judgments. His oneness in His right to judge, in His right to be the only judge and the only lawmaker, the only lawgiver to His slaves. Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his works mentioned the division of Tawheed into only two, and all the while not using the terms Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah and Asma'i wa Sifat. But he mentioned only two types of Tawheed, namely Tawheed al-Ilmi wal-I'tiqad and Tawheed al-Qasd wal-Irada. The first, Tawheed al-Ilmi wal-I'tiqad, Tawheed of knowledge and belief or conviction, and that would be the first and third today. So Rububiyyah together with Al-Asma'i wa Sifat. And the other category of Tawheed he mentioned was Tawheed al-Qasdi wal-Irada, Tawheed of intentions and desires, which would be what is commonly referred to today as Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah or Tawheed al-Ibadah. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi in his work Bada'i al-Fawaid doesn't mention Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma'i wa Sifat, and he lived 700 years before us, but also 700 years after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why consider it an invention if someone mentions a new category of Tawheed when these three categories that we are used to are not from the Sunnah? Also, Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi, a famous Hanafi scholar and the most famous commentator of the Aqidah Tahawiyah in Aqidah, said in his chapter on Tawheed, Tawheed to which the prophets called and which was the main content of the revealed books is of two types, Tawheed of confirmation and knowledge and Tawheed of search and intention. So he says about the Tawheed of confirmation and knowledge, it is acknowledging Allah's existence along with His deeds, names and attributes. In this He is unique, there is no one like Him in all these attributes as Allah Himself and His Messenger ﷺ informed us. So in the first category, he uses the term Tawheed of confirmation and knowledge to include what is known to us today as Tawheed al-Rububiyyah and Tawheed al-Asma'i wa Sifat. And in the second category, he mentions the Tawheed of search and intention. And he says that it is well defined by the following a short chapter from the Quran and mentions Surah Al-Kafirun as well as a verse from Surah Al-Imran. قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. Say, O you who have been given the book, تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم. Come to a word common to you and us. ألا نعبد إلا الله. That we do not worship anyone besides Allah. ولا نشرك به شيئا. And that we do not associate anything with Him in ibadah. ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. And that we do not take one another as gods besides Allah. If this is understood, a man could ask, how did the third one emerge from these two categories of Tawheed? How did the third emerge from these two categories? So, how was the first Tawheed, which the scholars mentioned 700 years ago as one, divided into two? The answer is that the people went astray in the matter of Allah's names and attributes, which was then a part of the first category. This is why it became necessary to separate this part, this field, the obligation to correctly believe in Allah's names and attributes, to separate it, to move it, to put it into a separate category, in order to explain to people that they, although they still believe in Allah's existence, Allah's power, might, strength, provision, creation, they are in a big error regard to this category, so the scholars derived it and separated it because of its importance. That is precisely why today many people, many scholars and du'at, many preachers, mention the category of Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, the Tawheed of Allah's oneness in legislation, in prescribing laws, in judging His slaves. Therefore, it is a lie and an abomination to say that this is not from the Sunnah, that it is an invented category, that it is a bid'ah, because these three, which today we have and consider as valid and the only correct ones, Those three are also not from the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nor from the Sunnah of the first four Khulafa, nor Sahaba, nor Tabi'un, or those who came after them. The definition of Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah is from the basis of faith, and certainly there are evidences for this in the Quran and Sunnah, and this category, Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, falls under all three mentioned categories of Tawheed. Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah enters into the very meaning of the first category, into the category Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, i.e. our belief and conviction that as Allah is the only ruler, the only creator, the only giver of life and death, and as He is the only provider and sustainer, so He is the only lawgiver to creatures, their only orderer and judge. The judgment and lawmaking belongs only to Him. Only He has the right to order and forbid to His slaves, as well as to judge them. Confirming this right of Hakimiyyah, His unique right to prescribe laws and to judge to His slaves, Almighty Allah says, إِلَّهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ in Surah Al-A'raf, إِلَّهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ, to Him, to Allah belongs creation and ordering. Only to Him belongs Al-Khalqu, creation, Wal-Amru, and right to order. So this is said on the topic that Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah really falls under the meaning of the definition of Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. It also falls under and enters the level and category of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah or Tawheed al-Ibadah. Why? Because only Allah, after He is the only judge, the only lawgiver, the only prescriber of laws for all His creatures, because He is like that, that is why only He has the right that people obey His judgments and go to Him for judgment. He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, said, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ يَزْعُمُونَ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ. Don't you see, O Muhammad, don't you see those who claim, who say, who imagine, who lie that they believe in what was revealed to you and in what was revealed before you? يُرِيدُونَ أَن يَتَحَاكَمُوا إِلَى الطَّاغُوتِ. You see them wanting to do tahakum. They want to dispute, to seek their right إِلَى الطَّاغُوتِ, before the Taghut. They want to be judged before the Taghut. وَقَدْ أُمِرُوا أَن يَكْفُرُوا بِهِ. And they were ordered not to believe in Him, in Taghut. They were ordered to commit kufr in Him, to deny Him, to reject Him, the Taghut. وَيُرِيدُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَن يُضِلَّهُمْ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. But Shaitan wants to lead them astray, in far away misguidance. After that, just as Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, Allah's oneness in His right to be the sole judge of His slaves, the sole lawgiver, just as Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah falls under the category of Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, and as I said, it also falls under Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, it also falls under the meaning and the definition of Tawheed al-Asma'i wa Sifat, because Allah's names are Al-Hakim and Al-Hakam, and His attribute is that He is the only one who has the right to be the sole and the only lawgiver. Allah's name and His perfect attribute that He is the only lawgiver, Al-Mushari'. Just as He is the only one who created everything, so He alone gave everything. He created a regulation and a law by which it must be governed and managed. Because of Allah's oneness in this matter, anyone who gets involved in Allah's legislation, anyone who involves in passing judgment upon Allah's servants apart from Allah's legislation, who puts himself as a lawgiver to people, he thereby, whether he realizes it or not, he elevates himself to the level of a taghut, a false god, and the one who refers to him, who that worship directs to him, who turns to him for judgment and obeys his laws, he becomes a mushrik, polytheist. Almighty Allah said in Surah Yusuf, on the tongue of Yusuf alayhi salam, إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. And the judgment doesn't belong to anyone but Allah. The judgment, the regulation, the legislation, the prescription, the authority doesn't belong to anyone else but Allah. أَمَرَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهِ. He commanded that you do not worship anyone else but Him. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That is the right faith. That is the true religion. And at the end of this ayah, we see a wonderful depiction of the reality of today's situation. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most of the people don't know. That is the right faith. That is the true religion. The judgment doesn't belong to anyone else but Allah. He commanded that you do not worship anyone else but Him. That is the right faith, that is the true religion, but most people do not know or will not know. So this is about the division of Tawheed itself, and much more can be said about this. Under the fourth point, we said that the Shahada La ilaha illallah includes complete Tawheed in all its categories. That a person should believe in all that is meant by the definition of Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma'i wa-Sifat, as well as Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, although the later and its meaning and what it refers to falls under all three categories that are known today. The fifth thing is that many people, including even the Taghuts of today, they have memorized the linguistic meaning of Shahada, so that when someone asks them, they would say that Shahada means that there is no God but Allah, or they would say without hesitation that none has the right to be worshipped besides Allah. We see many murji, many followers of the Taghuts and the Taghuts themselves, all the time imagining that they are Muslims or witnessing their kufr to themselves, but presenting their Islam to us and presenting themselves to us as Muslims, all the time violating all the postulates and principles of Islam by their own Taghutiyyah or by worshipping others as Taghut. All of them speak and immediately know to answer that the meaning of the word La ilaha illallah is that no one has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and they all the time worship others besides Allah, or they are worshipped and obeyed besides Allah. They do not think at all what those words mean. They violate them all their lives, but they know how to explain what Shahada means, and we see this on the tongue of many people who advocate Islam for themselves, who ascribe themselves to Islam, who attribute themselves to knowledge and da'wah to the right path. We see them talking about those topics, but unfortunately their actions are acts of shirk. They call for a voting, they call for the appointment of Taghuts, even though Sheikh Sulaiman bin Sahman, who was among the scholars of Da'wah Najdiyya, mentioned the verse Al-fitnatu akbaru min al-qatl, fitna is greater than killing, or Al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl, fitna is worse than killing, that what is worse than greater than killing, the fitna is actually shirk. Fitna is greater and worse than killing. Explaining this verse, Sulaiman bin Sahman says, if the inhabitants of the villages, deserts and cities all went to war and all killed each other, it would be better for them than to appoint for themselves a Taghut who will enforce upon them a law other than the law of Allah. The great words of Sheikh Sulaiman bin Sahman, who commented in this correct way on the words that fitna is worse and fitna is greater than killing, and he, like all Mufassirun, saw this fitna as shirk, and that shirk is being done today by so-called Muslims, so-called Salafiyun, so-called Ahl Sunnah, du'at with beards who invite people to commit shirk by voting, do it themselves, recommending it, praising it, loving it, advertising it, often obliging people to vote, to commit shirk in order to remove harms known only to them and to obtain benefits known only to them. And we certainly see that the first benefit they trampled on, and which a man must never and under no circumstances trample on, is a benefit of Tawheed. The first evil, the first harm they brought, which must not be brought, but they brought to the people and themselves, is the harm of shirk to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. You will hear their lectures on belief, on Iman, on Shahada, on Uluhiyyah, on Ubudiyyah, durus, lectures, speeches and talks, and they do things like this. Indeed, this is a huge, the biggest disaster. So we conclude by this, and we will continue in the next lectures inshallah ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.